Welcome back to another episode of 8158 Stories of Sacrifice. Today, we're diving into an important conversation around mental health in the first responder community with a very special guest, Dr. Thalia Nicholson. She holds a PhD in psychology and brings both professional expertise and personal experience as a fire wife of over 11 years. In this episode, Thalia shares insight into the unique challenges first responders and their families face, the impact of trauma and stigma, and practical ways departments and individuals can take action to support mental wellness. She also offers an honest look at why confidentiality matters, evidence-based treatments for PTSD, and why finding purpose beyond the uniform is essential. Whether you're a first responder, a family member, or someone passionate about mental health, this conversation is packed with valuable takeaways and hope for a healthier future. Let's get into it.
You're listening to 8158 Stories of Sacrifice, where we honor the bravery of the first responders and the families who stand behind them. Real people, real stories, real heroes. This is 8158. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 8158 Podcast, Stories of Sacrifice. Today's guest is we have Thalia. She has a PhD in psychology, and she would be somebody that you would be very interested in hearing her thoughts and views on things, and maybe you guys can get something out of her stories and the things that we're going to talk about today. How you doing, Thalia?
Good. Thanks for having me, y'all. I appreciate it. How are you doing?
Good. Very welcome. So before we get started, you said you had a disclaimer you would like to go over.
Yeah. So the views I share on your podcast reflect my own professional perspective and experiences as a psychologist, and the content is general educational purposes only, and it doesn't constitute professional advice and does not establish a, therapist-patient relationship, of course. And if listeners are in need of support, they're encouraged to contact a mental health professional in their area.
Okay, that was our disclaimer. So hopefully you guys understood this disclaimer to its full.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We appreciate you having that disclaimer so that everybody knows and understands this interview and they're not misunderstanding anything and trying to take it to heart. So.
Yeah. Try my best to be as honest as possible, backed by the research, and just talk about my experiences. So I hope it's helpful for even just one person. And I appreciate y'all doing this podcast. It has influenced a lot of people and a lot of people listen. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah, you're very welcome. We're going to do our best to keep the podcast rolling. We work very hard at this, and it's been definitely a journey. And it's been a hard journey, but it's been a very rewarding journey. It's helped me heal. It's helped me grow. I know it's helped Brienne grow also, even though she does most of the work.
That's awesome.
So you had told us earlier that you were a fire wife for 11 years.
11 years together. Yeah. My husband works for CAL FIRE. Okay. He's stuck with me, Rico. We're going on for 30 years plus. But yeah, my husband's worked for CAL FIRE since before I met him, and is now a captain up here in Northern California.
Okay. And so how does his role in CAL FIRE has that affected your mental health personally?
Yeah. I mean, I think being a fire wife comes with its challenges, but also so many beautiful things, right? Like of course, it's difficult when, our partners, our spouses, our family who are in the service leave, right? Especially during fire season, right? Like he's been gone for a few months at a time, and it definitely gets lonely. And you worry about their safety. And, his mom texts me when he's been out during fire season being like, have you heard from him? Is he okay? And I'm like, yeah, no, I haven't. And this is adding to the anxiety, but there's so many beautiful moments. Like really when they say once you're in the fire family, you're a part of it. And I've grown so many beautiful relationships with other fire wives. I've gotten close to my husband's colleagues. And it's really been an influence on what I do as well, right? Like hearing what some of his colleagues go through in terms of their mental health has been a huge influence on me better understanding what they encounter. And the biggest part is the mental health stigma, right? And we can engage in, table debriefings all day and go back and revisit calls and say what we could have done better. But when do we take the next step to say, okay, when do I improve how I'm feeling and my mental health so I can better serve my community? Because we can go back and say we should have done X, Y, and Z, but if we're not feeling at our best, how are we going to best serve our community?
Exactly. Yeah. They go through a lot, and we find a lot that people in the community don't understand the full extent of what our first responders go through.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and you could shed light on this perspective as well, sometimes the spouses don't even understand.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
with dealing with your husband, I don't know if he's had any compounding traumas or anything like that. How do you handle that situation if he had, or how would you handle it?
Yeah, like of course, he's encountered several critical incidents throughout his career. And especially when he was on the engine. Now my husband is part of the command center, so he oversees the dispatchers and those that work there. But when he was, attending in the engine, you are going to huge fires, you are going to medical incidents, and that does add up, right? That influences who he is and how he interacts with his community for sure. And also the dispatcher side of things too, right? Like you've talked about on your guys' podcast, right? Of like how dispatch work is also extremely difficult, right? And you feel like you even have less control over what is happening. And it's so unpredictable because you don't know what's coming, right? Versus when you get a call at the station to be sent out, you kind of have a little bit of an idea, not the most perfect, of course, but every single job he's had and every level he's been at has come with its own challenges, but he has made it a priority to take care of his well-being, whether it's mental and physical, to spend time with family, to have his hobbies, right? Because once you retire, that is the highest time for first responders to experience depression, suicidality, because you feel like you lose sight of who you are, right? That identity is no longer there like it used to be, right? And so he tries to maintain that to the fullest.
Right. Because, a lot of times we've come across first responders that have gotten out of their fields and have lost their purpose. So they end up going back, or they end up in a downward spiral.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
their purpose is gone.
And that's a huge component of the work that I do. And a lot of the research, what it shows is making sure you're identifying your purpose before that engine bay closes on your last day, right? Have people have your fire family, have your law enforcement family, but also have hobbies outside of just your job, have your community outside of just your job as well. So when that's no longer there on a daily basis as you had it before, you don't feel as isolated and secluded from the world or what you knew.
Right. You know, maybe like do some volunteer work, or, find some other purpose, something that could, help other people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it depends person to person, right? And also what they're coming to see me for, right? With a lot of trauma work specifically, we talk about making meaning later on in treatment is, how do we make sense of this event? Once we made sense of it, now what are you going to do with it? How can we make meaning out of this so it doesn't just have this one perspective?
Right.
How can we implement it in a more positive, lighter way in your current environment, your current community?
Right. So I wanted to ask you, you have other first responders that were in your family as well as military veterans. Is that what got you involved in psychiatry with first responders?
Psychology. I cannot believe, Rico, you just said psychiatry.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
I'm just messing with you, Rico. It's okay. No, I won't get on you too hard like I do with family members and friends who have done that. And they will still do that to me, even though they know very well. But no, for psychology, yeah, it was a huge personal factor that lended to me getting into this field, right? Like, of course, being a fire wife is a huge part of who I am, and it's informed who I am today and the way I interact with my patients. But really, it's my cultural background. And I know I briefly mentioned to you guys earlier that I'm from Cyprus, the Greek island in the Mediterranean Sea. And in 1974, Turkey invaded our country and has occupied the northern half of Cyprus since then. And I saw how war can impact an entire country, communities, and also, of course, my family. And the one thing that kind of held steadfast is seeing my grandparents being of service to people, even though they lost everything in the war. Like they never hesitated to help others. And so that was instilled in me from a very young age. And I remember my grandfather always saying, the one thing nobody can ever take from you is your knowledge, right? And so I really was influenced by the two people that helped raise me, and it motivated me to work specifically with PTSD as well as comorbid diagnoses. But also in Cyprus, men are mandatory to serve in the military. So long line of military and first responders in my family as well.
So you would say that, in your field, anything that is spoken in your office is confidential, correct?
Yeah, that is like such a huge question I get actually is what I tell you really confidential? Or, I'll go visit my husband at work and I'll be talking a little bit about what I do. And, his colleagues and our friends will be like, it's not really confidential. I'm like, no, it is. Like, there are some reasons. I always tell people, right, if a judge subpoenas records, that may warrant breaking confidentiality. And with that, you, like me and my patient, would discuss it. I'm not just going to hand over records. But if it's court ordered by the judge, unfortunately, I have no say in those moments. Another one is if a patient discloses child or elderly abuse, that also warrants breaking confidentiality. And then risk to self, so suicidal ideation. And I always like to specify with my patients of like, telling me you have suicidal thoughts does not break confidentiality. I'm not going to be like, okay, we got to get a wellness check and, you're going to have to go to inpatient. And no, like, that's a quite common experience for every human, especially in the first responder and military profession. Like, you're going to have moments where you feel like, what's the point? And, you know, I wish I could just not wake up tomorrow. And I appreciate when they tell me, because that takes like so much courage to open up about that. And I always tell my patients, right? Like, if you tell me you have a specific plan, a specific date, and you have intent to act on it, you and I are going to figure out better care, higher level of care for you. You're never going to leave our session being like, oh crap, is Thalia going to break confidentiality? Like, is a law enforcement officer just going to show up at my door? Like, no, like this is a partnership, and we're going to figure it out together. And a big thing too is when I meet my patients, since a lot of them are first responders, we're going to discuss, like, if safety concerns come up, what hospital do you feel comfortable going to? If I need to contact your department, right? If you're a law enforcement and I need a contact to do a wellness check, who's somebody you want me to ask to talk to, right? Rather than me just talking to just anybody. So there's specific things a culturally competent therapist should be doing to make sure that, you know, you're doing it in the most appropriate way when you work with these departments closely, when you work with these hospitals really closely. And then the fourth reason breaking confidentiality is for a similar reason, but for risk to others, right? If you have intent, plan, that would warrant me notifying law enforcement and the intended victim if I can. But of course, make sure to check with your state regulations on that. That is just the way that I practice here in California.
So can you explain to me what is a EAP?
EAP, so that's the Employee Assistance Program for first responders to utilize. It's therapy sessions that are covered by their department through insurance, like one that I hear often in California is Magellan. And they'll cover a certain number of sessions for first responders to get mental health care.
Okay. I know a lot of officers or first responders may have concerns about, since their department might be covering a lot of that. Now, does that information go back to their departments, or only just, or is
yeah.
It
So because it's through insurance, it's still confidential, but it's not like private pay. If you go see a provider through private pay, they don't have to put a diagnosis on record. Versus if you're using your insurance through EAP or any insurance, your provider, psychologist, psychiatrist, MFT, right? Like, they have to legally put a diagnosis on record, treatment plan, as well as other factors for reimbursement purposes. So insurance requires that. So through EAP, your provider is not going to go tell your command, hey, they're using substances, or hey, they have depression or trauma symptoms. Nothing goes back to your command, but it's more so there's a paper trail now of the services you have been getting that insurance requires.
So it's just for insurance purposes only, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I know, we've talked to other first responders, actually sheriff's deputies and police officers, and their concerns about going to see somebody is that if they are labeled with any kind of mental health issues, that they will lose their jobs, they will take their firearms. Is that something that you have control over, or is that something that happens in the state of California? I know it happens in other states, but
yeah. So kind of multiple areas. In terms of me, I have had patients who will say, you know, are you going to take my gun if I tell you X, Y, and Z, or can you? And it's like, no, like, I don't have that authority to be able to do that, nor would I, I don't know how I would even do that. Right. So a lot of times I find that's a huge concern, especially for law enforcement and also military personnel. In terms of a diagnosis disqualifying them or getting them taken out of work, I think it really depends state to state, department to department, right? Unfortunately, and fortunate, there's pros and cons, right? There are some diagnoses depending on state regulations. And again, the institution that will pose as a reason to somebody maybe losing their security clearance or being medically discharged from active duty military or whatever it might be. And I always tell people that's where like the fitness for duty evaluations come in. And it's not the department is ultimately the people who make the decision on whether or not you get reassigned or are being let go from the department or whatever the consequence is. The psychologist or the MD, the physician who does the fitness for duty evaluation, is just doing the evaluation, giving their kind of prognosis and saying whether or not you are a liability to yourself or others in terms of safety.
So it just depends on the severity of what they have figured out through the testing and the diagnosis and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of times what providers tend to do and what you should be practicing as a psychologist or a physician who does these assessments. And I don't do them in California. I used to help do them in Tennessee when I was out there, but is using your clinical judgment, right? Like if somebody has PTSD and their trauma symptoms are elevated, what does that look like? How is that causing impairment, if any impairment in their job? Is it more causing impairment at home? Are they able to cope with the symptoms? Are they willing to engage in treatment? Right? Like there's different severities and resiliency levels and abilities to cope. And it just really depends case to case. And so it depends on the objective assessment measures, your clinical interview with your patient, their history, right? Like the departments are giving you the background history. They're releasing their medical records to you as well. So you put that all together to create a whole picture and then make your decision based on all the information.
So what is your take on PTSD? I know we have other guests and other individuals that don't refer to it as PTSD. They refer to it as PTS or PTSI as an injury. So give us a rundown of what PTSD is.
Yeah, so PTSD is the DSM-5 term for the trauma symptoms we develop after experiencing a traumatic incident. So that's why I use that term, right? That's the way we use it for diagnostic reasons. And PTSD develops because we have directly experienced a traumatic event. We have witnessed a traumatic event. We have learned the adverse details that have come out of nowhere about an adverse event to somebody close to us, or we've had repeated exposure to traumatic incidents, right? Like first responders, military personnel. So you've either directly experienced, witnessed, or repeated exposure to the traumatic incidents. And then because of that, you've developed trauma symptoms. And there's 4 kind of umbrellas that I describe to patients. The first is the intrusive symptoms, right? This is kind of what you think of intrusive memories, nightmares, flashbacks, emotional and physiological reactions when something reminds us of the traumatic event. Then we have the, avoidance symptoms. Internal avoidance is like avoiding the memories. I'm going to stay as busy as possible. I'm going to pick up as much overtime as possible to get my mind off of what happened. I don't want to feel, I want to suppress. It works to keep me safe on the job, so I'm going to continue doing it off the job when I take that uniform off. And then external avoidance, avoiding people, places, situations that remind us of the traumatic event, which is really hard sometimes as a first responder if the traumatic event happened in the community that you live in. And then the third umbrella is the negative cognition and mood. So this involves cognitive distortions like I am a failure, it's my fault, the world is completely dangerous, no one can be trusted, all those unhelpful beliefs develop, as well as self-blame, right? And also anger, irritability, fear, shame. And then the last umbrella is like our arousal symptoms, the hypervigilance, feeling like my head is always on a swivel. I need to suss people out. I'm always looking for a weapon on people. I'm looking at their intentions. My back is to a wall, door is in front of me. I'm looking all around me. If a loud sound happens, right? Like you've seen in movies, right? Of sound, the car backfiring and somebody feeling heightened in that moment compared to other people, and sleep difficulties, concentration difficulties. So that's what makes up PTSD according to our diagnostic statistical manual.
Now, is it just first responders that get PTSD, or can that happen to just anybody? Like just your average person that has dealt with any problems or anything like that?
Yeah, anybody can experience it as long as they have that initial exposure to the traumatic event, right? Not everything's a traumatic event. And that's where the clinical expertise comes in to figure out, okay, is this really a traumatic event? And then has that influenced these symptoms that they're reporting? But a lot of times I'll hear people say, I don't deserve this diagnosis, especially for military personnel, right? I don't deserve this because I didn't have boots on the ground, right? I didn't get deployed to a combat zone. Like I shouldn't have this. Why do I have this? And it's like, there are multiple traumatic events that humans can experience that qualify as trauma without having to have boots on the ground, right? Simple example are dispatchers. They're taking phone calls, and that repeated exposure can develop PTSD, but technically somebody can say they don't have boots on the ground, which I could argue differently, but that's just an example, right?
Right. Yeah, because the reason why I ask is because, obviously I was never in the military, which I had fully intended on doing when I was younger, and I squandered that opportunity away. But, growing up, I had a lot of abuse in the home, seeing a lot of really bad things. And, it definitely affected me in a way that I would say stunted my growth. And also, none of that stuff really came out until I got older. And now I developed really bad panic attacks. I couldn't say that I have PTSD, but the panic attacks definitely come from somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And I've worked with a lot of people where they have had similar experiences, right? Where you are in survival mode. And once you kind of are out of that or have a sense of stillness, that's when, mental health symptoms or concerns start coming up. So that's not uncommon to hear years later that is an experience for you. And I've also heard that a lot with military and first responders. I was totally fine during deployment, or I was totally fine when I was on duty all these years. And then it wasn't until I retired, or it wasn't until I came back stateside. And now it just like kind of hit me out of nowhere, and I'm isolating. I feel anxious. I feel on edge. My head's on a swivel. I just don't want to go anywhere. I don't trust anybody. Right. So it's not uncommon, because it's the stillness when you're not in survival mode and trying to keep yourself safe and others safe that it starts happening.
So moving on here, what are the evidence-based treatments for PTSD?
Oh, gosh.
Do you know, are they really effective? Or
yeah, I mean, I don't think I would be in my profession if I didn't feel like they were effective. There's a lot, though. I'm very evidence-based treatment oriented as a psychologist. Not everybody's like that. Some providers prefer to take a more talk therapy approach, and that's okay. Works for some people. I just trained in the VA system, where most of our vets, as well as when I trained with first responders, they don't want to be in treatment for 2, 3, 10 years, right? So I do EBPs, evidence-based practices. And I typically say 12 to 15 sessions, give or take, of course, depending on the treatment, right? And I also do models of accelerated service delivery, which abbreviated as MAST, which means that we're going to do the evidence-based treatment in an accelerated fashion for my first responders. So they're in and out of treatment within 2 to 3 weeks, because I know that your rotating shift schedule is not going to work for 3-4 months of treatment on a weekly basis at the same time on the same day of the week. Like, it's just not conducive, right? And so I really try to make it accessible, and it is based in research. I always tell my patients, go look at Division 12's website. It's APA's website for discussing all the treatments depending on the diagnosis, and it'll tell you the research efficacy, if it's strong, moderate, or weak for that treatment. So when you're looking for a provider in your area, go see what the treatments are that they provide and go to Division 12 and check it out. If it's low or weak research efficacy, maybe it's not, I don't know, right? Just because something hasn't been highly researched doesn't mean that it's not going to be effective, but it's something to be mindful of. And then in terms of the trauma treatments that I find to be effective and based on the research literature are effective, are cognitive processing therapy, which you address the unhelpful beliefs that stem from the traumatic event, to have a different perspective. It's an exposure-based treatment. All the treatments I do are exposure-based, because the one thing that keeps us stuck in the recovery process with PTSD is internal and external avoidance. The second treatment that's highly effective is prolonged exposure therapy. That one is you go out into the community and you do what we say are called in vivo exposures. So putting yourself in situations that you have avoided because they remind you of the trauma and create that hypervigilance. And then you're also going to talk about your trauma in session and record the session and listen to it. So decreasing that internal avoidance. So again, that exposure piece. And then the cognitive processing therapy and prolonged exposure therapy, I can add a substance use component to do COPE or ICPT. So a lot of times veterans and first responders I work with drink or use other substances. So we'll do trauma treatment alongside that. And then I offer one that I really, really like is cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy for PTSD. And it doesn't necessarily have to be done with couples. It could be done with a family member, but it's an exposure-based treatment where you have somebody support you throughout the treatment while you engage in exposure exercises. You are also working on your communication, right? Because PTSD not only affects the individual, but also the family unit. So you're going to have somebody who's going to better understand why you've been behaving this way, why you've been feeling this way. How can we communicate through this? And now how can I support you in doing the exposure exercises? So this is like a very rudimentary description of some of the evidence-based treatments I do, but it's just the overall picture is exposure-based treatments that are time limited. 6 to 15 sessions is typically based on the treatment, what I'm doing.
Okay. Aside from your evidence-based treatments, do you have any other garden variety therapy sessions, or do you tailor those sessions to the individual, and what can they expect from you?
Mm-hmm. Always tailor it to the individual, right? Just because I'm doing evidence-based treatments doesn't mean that we're going to stick to it very strictly, right? I always say, because a lot of people will say, well, Thalia, have you worn the uniform? Like, how are you going to understand what I'm going through? And I always say is like, even if I wore the uniform and I was standing right next to you during the traumatic event and I was looking in the same direction, doing the same behaviors as you, I would be different today than you are, right? Like the way we internalize events, the way we cope with them, our resiliency levels, our upbringing, our current environment differs person to person. So I don't wear the uniform, but my job here is to give you the clinical tools that I know are highly effective and for you to teach me who you are, because you're the expert of yourself. So treatment, yes, I give them the research-backed treatments, but we're going to tailor it to the person to make the perfect recipe for them. I just know my first responders, they don't want to be in treatment forever, most of them. So it works this way.
That, that would probably be beneficial. I mean, everybody's different. So like you said, you got to treat them differently and
Exactly.
figure out
Yeah.
ways of tapping into their
And I always,
psyche.
yeah, definitely tapping into that. And I always tell people, like, just like you would go and give a medication a try, whether it's a mental health medication or what, sometimes the medication isn't the right fit for you. Sometimes the provider is not the right fit for you, and that's okay. You are the patient, you are the client. You get to say, you're not the right fit for me, or hey, I want to try something different, right? I always tell my patients, let's give this a go. Give it 4 to 6 sessions. If we're not seeing improvements, that's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out to adapt. Let's try a different treatment, because that's totally normal in therapy. I don't think it happens all the time. Most of the time, the treatments are effective if we pick the right treatment for the person themselves. But there are times where you got to switch things up, just like you would do with your medical doctor.
We will return after this quick ad break.
The William H. Bill Butler Jr. Foundation is on a mission to honor first responders and support those who serve. We provide scholarships for families who have lost a hero in the line of duty, offer second chances to juvenile offenders who are working to rebuild their future, and help new recruits pursuing careers as first responders. Through generous donations and the sale of merchandise, we're building a community that uplifts, empowers, and creates lasting impact. You can be a part of this mission as well. Visit 8158podcast.com to donate or shop today. Together, we can support those who serve, honor those we've lost, and give hope to those who need it most. Behind every badge is a story, and behind every story is a sacrifice. This is the 8158 podcast, where we honor the lives and legacies of first responders and their families. If our mission speaks to your heart, if these stories move you like they move us, join us on Patreon. For just $5 a month, you'll get ad-free listening, exclusive merchandise, behind-the-scenes content, and video episodes only available to our patrons. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement, and you can be a part of it. Support us at patreon.com/8158podcast. Let's continue to share the stories that deserve to be heard.
How can departments improve on their wellness initiatives to better support mental health for their employees?
I think in a lot of ways. I can get on a soapbox about this. I mean, I think we've come. How long do we have for this recording? I can give you all my ideas. No, but genuinely, I really do feel like departments over the years have improved in their initiatives, right? Like, we've come such a long ways, and it's because people are more willing to talk about things. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to the department and they're just all talking about their mental health concerns and saying that they're in therapy and all that. But it is a conversation that's being invited during trainings. And also from people who are seeking mental health. Patients will go back and they'll start talking about their experiences, and that opens up the door. But I think a big thing is having command be open to mental health, to speaking about it, to having an open door policy. And that's not the perfect answer, right? Because even if you have an open door policy, your employees are still probably not going to always come talk to you about their mental health concerns. So it's additional efforts like, during your trainings, right, your onboarding trainings, have a therapist, have a psychologist come and do a hour talk on first responder mental health. Have people come by and give resources, have resources readily available that are not just through EAP, that can be through private pay and that are not apparent mental health resources, right? So like, for example, my business card, it's not like very apparent that they're getting mental health services if they grab that off the table, right? Because there is so much stigma. So finding ways to reduce the stigma and having easily accessible resources are easy ways for departments to get the ball rolling. But the bigger thing is would be the most optimal is having a provider in-house, right? Can you create a contract with a psychologist or a therapist to have somebody there readily available to support your employees or even support them on mental health calls, right? And I know there's a debate in the community of, how effective is that? How safe is it? But just having somebody in-house or even just a contract, right? Like our department's going to pull money out of our wellness funds. So we'll pay X amount of sessions for each employee for the year. Of course, smaller departments in rural areas don't have that money, but there are providers out there that will do that work, right? Like I offer pro bono services when I can. There are providers out there that will do things like that, especially for departments that don't have the resources.
Yeah, it's one of our missions with this podcast is to try to, get the word out and try to talk about mental health more with our first responders so that we can hopefully affect change and try to stop the stigma, at least try to bring more understanding to it. We had a guest on here who didn't really have a lot of traumas. He had a good life. He was a police officer at that time. Now he's a sheriff's deputy. He never really had any problems. He just wanted to talk to somebody just to get some stuff off of his chest. And he always worried that if he did, he would lose his job. Not that he was like going through some really traumatic stuff. It was just the fact that he just wanted to get some stuff off of his chest and just kind of let things go and this and that. So what kind of ways can we better ourselves to try to stop this stigma or to try to reach out to these departments and bring some more understanding and light to that?
I mean, Rico, one thing you just mentioned though was amazing. And I wish I had listened to that episode, and I'm going to after this, is you don't need to have significant mental health concerns to seek services. Like that is an amazing thing to do, is that preventative measure. Just like you go to your doctor to take preventative measures to do your physicals, you can do that with your therapist as well. So I think that's amazing to hear that was a possibility, right? That's unfortunate that there's the concern still. But again, depends department to department. But if there aren't significant mental health concerns, then it is just a preventative thing, and that confidentiality is still upheld. And again, right, like nothing for me, right, speaking from my experience in my state, and as a psychologist, I don't go back to command and tell them anything. I don't go to your partner, your wife, your husband, nobody. What we discuss in therapy stays between us, aside from the few things I told you would warrant breaking confidentiality. But in terms of going back to your question of like, what can departments do to reduce the stigma? A big one is having trainings on that. I think having a therapist go talk about what mental health stigma is, what does it look like within departments, debunk some of the myths that come with seeking mental health services, is a huge step, right? And I've done that for departments doing trainings like that, and building those relationships, getting people accustomed to seeing you, right? Like that it's not just like in movies where you come sit on a like, what is it, like the little beds and just talk about your dreams and that's that and whatever else. Like it's not like that, right? Like I'm cutting up in session with my patients. I'll engage in some dark humor. I'm going to meet you where you're at. But just having those conversations. And again, like I said, I think the biggest way to have a trickle down like change is for command to make that change, because you're setting an example. Leaders set an example. And so if your employees respect you, or if they notice that you're making this positive change, that will gain momentum, that will gain more respect. It's just difficult. I have to acknowledge that, right? Like going against the grain feels extremely uncomfortable, especially when your peers are looking at you and what are they thinking about me? Is this really, what we're wanting to do? Do we have the effort, the money to put this into our department now, right? There's a lot more. It's easy for me to sit here and say, this is what departments should do. It's just, this is what the research has shown to be a good, effective initial step.
Right. We actually had two other guests on here with similar, almost identical traumatic situations, and one of them was pretty much just ousted out of the department because of his mental health. In the other one, he was ousted out of his department because of his mental health as well. And they both had a downward spiral. Fortunately, they both come out of it, and they've done great things with it. One of them wrote a book. It's called Resilient Courage. You remember what that was called, Brienne? Resilience and Courage?
Do you have it right there in front of you?
I do, but
I don't remember what it's called. I'm sorry.
Relentless Courage.
Relentless Courage. Okay.
Yeah, and that was by Sergeant Michael Segru. He was a sergeant in Walnut Creek, California.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check that book out.
Yeah, excellent book. I listened to it on the what do they call that?
Audible?
Yes.
Podcast?
Audible. I listened to it on Audible because, I don't have much time to read. So.
Fair.
I did listen to that. And our other guest, Captain Adam Myers, he came out of his slump, and eventually he became a captain in his department in Wisconsin. His chief totally supports what he does, and he has a nonprofit organization as well as being a captain in his police department. And
that's awesome.
It's just amazing that to see the differences between the two departments. And it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, every department that I've worked with, their command is the reason that those changes are happening, right? It's not their lower level employees. And it's usually, I've worked with chiefs who've been open to it. It's also the training captain who's making decisions on what to do for the trainings for onboarding, right? Like you're hitting the nail on the head that you have to have a supportive management and people above you to feel comfortable to make these changes within the department. And having the resources, of course, makes it a little bit easier. So,
right.
Yeah.
And reaching out to people, I would hope that, anybody listening, especially first responders, regardless of where you're at, what you're doing, what profession you're in, reach out. If you need help, reach out to somebody, talk to somebody, and get help.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people I've heard feel like, I don't matter, right? Like I'm always just expected to just keep everybody else safe, but who's keeping me safe? And nobody, you're taught to protect your community, but you're never taught really how to protect yourself going into this profession. It's all good, right? Like when you want to continue a family tradition of being in the military or first responder profession, or serve your community in some way. But what happens when you do have this repeated exposure? I often tell people it's surprising when you aren't affected by what you have seen, right? Like we haven't adapted as humans to be able to not be affected. We know that we've adapted to know when situations are dangerous. We've adapted to kind of be in that hyper vigilant mode. But imagine experiencing that on a daily basis, every single shift you're on. And then you get off, of course, they're going to struggle to turn it off. I always think about it like the light switch behind me. It got switched on day one, and over time it got plastered over, and you haven't learned how to turn it back off. So of course you're going to be on edge when you go home,
Right.
and when you're out and about in your community. Not everybody, of course, right? Some first responders are able to witness, to experience, and keep pushing forward. But I've found it to be the norm to be affected in some way, maybe not to a clinically significant level, but to need support at the bare minimum.
Right. I know a lot of my stuff, my personal traumas, had affected me in such a way that it put me in a depression. And when I was young, I had kids very early on. I was 20 years old when I had my first daughter. I had nowhere to go in life. I lived in a small town in Montana. I didn't want that kind of life, and I felt lost. And I wanted better for myself. That's why I made the decision to want to enlist in the Guards. I couldn't go into the Marines because I had a juvenile record, and they wouldn't accept me unless I had prior military experience.
Hmm.
But during that process, I was in a depression, and I had a lot of doubt, a lot of insecurities, and I basically sabotaged everything that I was trying to do because of all of that stuff happening. Whatever was going on in my head basically said I wasn't good enough. I couldn't do it. I wasn't going to amount to nothing. Everything that I heard in the past, um, being a failure, all that stuff, it just kind of came up and sabotaged that. And I let it happen. And so, I was just a knucklehead and did stupid things.
You use the resources you had at the time that you knew, right? Like, of course, looking back now, you're like, I wish I had done X, Y, and Z, but that's what you had at the time, right? And you made the decision that you thought was best for yourself in that moment. And it sounds like there was a little bit of that survival mode, like we were talking about earlier. But it's the same thing, right? Like first responder, military culture, for any frontline, right? Any person who's experiencing a traumatic event that is repeatedly exposed to traumatic events, it's like having a cup, right? Like every single time you experience a traumatic event, not only is it that memory, but then it's like the thoughts you were saying. I'm a failure. I'm weak. It's my fault it happened. And eventually that cup is going to get filled with all those memories, those cognitive distortions, those difficult emotions and feelings, that anger, that irritability, that shame, that blame. And your cup is going to spill over. And at some point, you're going to have to address it, or you're going to be in survival mode and things are going to eventually start disintegrating in your well-being, your self-image, your self-efficacy, your relationships with others, your involvement in the community, your work, right? Like it unfortunately affects so many areas of people's lives. And then you reach a point of saying, okay, well, what I'm doing is no longer working. Now what? Should I seek support? Am I willing to kind of, go against the grain and seek services, even though it feels like I'm weak for doing that, even though I argue differently, since you're going against the grain, it actually shows the opposite of being weak, in my opinion. But, what do I know?
Yeah, it takes a lot of strength to be able to admit that there's something wrong and that you need help and then you seek help, and then it's even harder to open up to somebody and spill all of that stuff that's inside of you. Obviously trust issues and a lot of that stuff, but it takes a lot more strength to do that than it does to hold it in and live with the pain and the guilt and the regrets and all of the stuff that goes on with the depression and whatever is going on with that person at that time.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to engage in treatment. And I always tell my patients, like, the hardest part is the intake, where you're telling me some of the things, right? But after that, you start getting into the treatment. And of course, naturally, right? Like like your symptoms are heightened, they're up here. You're going to see a little, an increase, right? Especially with exposure-based treatment for PTSD, inevitably. But then you're going to see this huge decline and you're going to be feeling better. And a lot of people, are like, why haven't I done this earlier? Why? I can't believe it. I feel like I can just be still, like I can be present with my family, that I'm not on edge and snapping at the people around me, that I feel motivated to go out and do things, right? With depression, we need to just celebrate those little wins. And eventually you build up that self-efficacy and you're like, damn, I'm doing the damn thing, So it is hard at the beginning, and then it gets easier and easier and easier. And I always tell people, my number one goal is for you to become your own therapist, so you don't need me, right? Of course, I would love for the symptoms to decrease, which if you become your own therapist, inevitably that means your symptoms are decreasing. But people are surprised when I say that, right? Like I want you to feel better. I want you to go out and feel confident in implementing these tools by yourself without me. Of course, I'll be here if you ever need me. But yeah.
Yeah. We'd all hope that, things get better, which they do. They get better. And it just takes time and willingness to open up and just to admit that you have an issue.
And finding the right fit.
Yeah.
To open up.
Yeah.
Right.
Finding the right therapist or whatever you're trying to look for. Whether it's a support group or, just talking to somebody. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or anything.
I was about to say, Rico, did you just pull the psychiatrist card again?
No. I was just saying in general.
Yes. For the audience, psychiatrist is medication, psychologist is mental health therapy, yes. Assessments, I'm just giving you crap.
Yeah. Yeah, I see a therapist. Well, I was. Now I'm doing this treatment with another guest who is former military, and also he was a retired police officer. They do therapy sessions for people. They do a nonprofit, so they do it for free.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I figured I'd give it a try and see what it was like. And so it's interesting. It seems to help for the most part. Yeah. And it's awesome. It's called healingtheheroes.org. I don't know if you ever heard of that before. But he's on there. His name is Dan. He's on our podcast, so you'll have to listen. Actually, you'll have to listen to the whole thing.
I know. I thought I listened to quite a bit of it, but apparently I need to catch up even more.
I don't know. How many episodes do we have now, Brienne, that came out?
We had, let me see, I can tell you right here. We had 43 in season 1, and we are now at episode 7 for season 2. So, and then plus we had a few bonus episodes. So we've had over 50 episodes.
Yeah.
Good for you guys. That's awesome.
So, yeah, you'll have to check them out. Some emotional, some funny. Yeah. They're actually
No, I
all
love what
pretty
I've already was
informative.
hearing, hence why I'm here. If I didn't, then I wouldn't have done this. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate you coming on. It's definitely
Same.
been very informative, and I definitely had a pleasure. Now, Brianne, did you have any questions for Thalia or anything like that?
No, I don't have any specific questions. I was just going to ask her to let everybody know how to reach her if they're in California and they need services.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, you can reach me at americasfirstresponderservices.com. And I specifically, if you couldn't tell from this episode already, I specialize in working with first responders, active duty military, veterans, and their family members, and specialize in PTSD and comorbid diagnoses like chronic pain, insomnia, depression, anxiety, panic, and suicidality and homicidality. I also offer assessment services and then consultation, training, program development services for departments themselves. So, yeah, reach out.
And you take most insurances?
No, I don't take any insurances.
Oh, okay.
I don't take any insurances because, well, multiple reasons, but I'm just going to give one. Private pay means confidential completely, no diagnoses on record. You get to kind of, you have more, as a patient, you have more of a say in how things look. We're not limited in number of sessions and so forth. So, yeah. But sliding scale, I got to put that out there, sliding scale and pro bono. But I reserve pro bono for like really, really rural communities and departments that can't afford mental health treatment.
That's great that you do that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah. I trained in Tennessee, as I was saying earlier, and specifically worked in really, really rural areas of Appalachia, and really just saw so many significant barriers to people accessing services, in addition to the mental health stigma in those communities. And then on top of that, with my first responders and veterans, you have the stigma within their professional cultures compounding all that. So just shout out to East Tennessee State University, amazing PhD program. And it is very rewarding working with such communities. So, yeah.
And how long have you been a psychologist?
So I finished my residency last year. And so essentially for clinical psychologists, what you do is you go get your PhD 4 to 5 years, give or take, depending on the program. You then go do your internship year, which is a residency. Then you graduate, unlike the medical side of things where they graduate, then go do their residency. After you graduate, then you have to do another 1,500 hours for your fellowships, your postdoc. Then you sit for your national board exam and then your jurisprudence exam for the state that you're in. Some states don't require the ethics side of things, but yeah. So we've been in it for a while, but now I got my private practice going and I'm loving it. And awesome. Yeah, thank you.
And what was that again? America's for First Responders? Is that what it was?
americasfirstresponderservices.com.
America's First Responder Services.com.
Pretty straightforward. You can't confuse the specialty area I work with, right?
Right.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm virtual throughout California too. So
that's good. That's good.
And you can only counsel people that live in the state that you are licensed in.
Yes. So that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, so California licensed clinical psychologist cannot partake in this program called PsyPact. I believe it developed during COVID times for psychologists, specifically psychologists, to be able to provide services across states to people during that time. California has said we're not doing that. So there are some providers that you will see are licensed in California, but they actually reside in a different state. So that's how they're able to provide services through SciPact and be licensed throughout several states. But we're here, and this is the state. But I do have a goal of getting licensed in Tennessee. Hopefully, I really want to do it by springtime, so I can start providing services again to departments that I was working out there with.
That's great.
Thanks.
That would be via through Zoom or
Yeah, that'll be through telehealth since
telehealth.
unless people would like to, departments have the extra finances to fly me out all the time, then yeah, but yeah, it'll be virtual. And yeah, so Tennessee's way of getting licensed, since I did the national kind of board exam we have, I would have to go in person and do the jurisprudence, like the ethical exam. So that's why it's kind of up in the air when I can actually go in person and take that one, but it'll be quicker than the first time of getting licensed out here. So
yeah, pretty well versed.
Yeah, when you go through it once, you realize how much there is. And a lot of people will say like, oh, once you're licensed in California, you pretty know how to do it across different states if you want to get licensed in different states. And but yeah, I was like at my wit's end studying for months. But I'm super appreciative of it because now I'm like, okay, I know this forwards and backwards. I know my ethics. I know my laws. We'll see how long it sticks, but don't tell the Board of Psychology that because it's going to stick forever, right?
Yeah.
Now,
go ahead.
I just want to sorry, squirrel moment. So we just recently interviewed a therapist that lives in North Carolina, and she was saying that there was a federal law that was passed that in 2027 you'll be able to do like telehealth stuff in other states. How does that work or do you not know about that?
She's a psychologist?
Well, she's a
therapist.
She's a mental health therapist.
Yes. Okay. So from what I've heard, and I don't know exactly the program she's talking about, but yes, the master's level therapists are now creating a program they have created the program that is like SciPact for psychologists. So I think it's going to be for them because SciPact is just for clinical psychologists.
Okay.
So I think if I'm assuming, I don't know if this is the program she's talking about, but I have heard of them developing or have developed that for the master's level clinicians.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So they'll be able, I don't know if it's going to be like SciPact where states like sign into it and make a decision on doing it state by state if they're going to allow for that. I'm assuming so. And I don't know if California is going to be one of those. We'll see.
Hopefully. I mean,
yeah,
the more help that our first responders can get and people can get, the better.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Not that everybody's crazy, but everybody's crazy.
Is that your clinical formulation?
Yeah. That's just based on what I see every day.
Rico, your diagnosing skills are like just perfection, honestly.
I'm just great. I'm just teasing. No, but there are some really weird and crazy things happening in this country these days, and I just don't understand what's happening, why it's happening, but it's happening.
Yeah, out of our control.
Yep. And people are nuts when it comes to driving.
I would have to agree with that one. Yeah. But I might be one of those people too. Who knows? I might be biased. And I live in California. Come on. The driving out here Like when I was living in Tennessee, when I first went out to Tennessee, I was like, why is everyone driving like they're just like on a leisure like stroll? I'm like, can we put our foot on the gas, please? And then I moved back out here and I was like, oh my gosh, if they don't get off my ass, I'm gonna lose it. And now it's coming back to California driving. So we make do with what we have.
Yeah, they do that here in Kentucky too. They'll ride you. And,
Yeah.
you
know what? But you got to be careful though, especially in Tennessee where you don't know how people are going to react. Also in California, of course, but you know.
Yeah, I will say California obviously has terrible drivers because everyone has to go 100 miles an hour all the time. They're always in a hurry. But I will say I've lived in a lot of states and Kentucky's a close second. They are terrible drivers here. They don't follow traffic laws. They just do whatever they feel like it. So Kentucky is a close second when it comes to bad drivers.
The people are really super friendly and really nice. But when it comes to driving, they're just a bunch of They get really crazy when they're driving. They do. They get nuts.
I mean, it's the different cultures, right? Like that even makes me think of when I went to Tennessee, like I lived in Northeast Tennessee, so like Jonesboro, Johnson City area, and it's the storytelling town. I don't know exactly how they would phrase Jonesboro. I think shows how I swear I live there. I should know this. But all my veterans, all my first responders were like, let me tell you about my entire life and these stories. And like, it's just so animated. And at first I was like, what is like, I'm not sure we're getting to the question that I asked, but it always related. But I was so used to California culture of quick, like super fast all the time that I had to shift the way I clinically practiced out there. And that's also helped me out here, right? Like where it's okay to slow down, right? And so it's interesting hearing the different ways people act and behave, even across state lines. So there is definitely a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, Montana's definitely different as well.
How so?
It's just the way of life, different things. I mean, they still have the same problems. Obviously, Montana has a few good-sized cities, but, predominantly rural. A lot of it is rural, and counties are super big. There's only like 56 counties in Montana. It's one of the biggest states in the United States. And a lot of it's mountainous. Some of it's, badlands, and some of it's rolling hills and farmlands, and just the landscape changes. And it seems like the mentality changes too. The further east you go, the different mentalities you have.
I mean, I can see that. Yeah, I was similar in Tennessee, but I've never been to Montana, honestly. So, I mean, it sounds beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate y'all and everything you do with the podcast and just bringing light to first responders, military, and mental health. And so thank you for what you do.
We appreciate that. And you're very welcome. And hopefully you have a good night. And thank your husband for his service for us.
Will do.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll let him know.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thalia Nicholson, PhD, psychologist.
Bye, y'all.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you for joining us on 8158 Stories of Sacrifice. Every story we share is a tribute to the courage and resilience of first responders and their families. If this episode impacted, encouraged, or inspired you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who supports first responders. Follow us on all social media platforms at 8158 Podcast for updates. 8158 Stories of Sacrifice is a team effort. Rico brings the stories to life through casting, writing, original music, and editing. Brianne Shipley as production manager, handling booking, social media, graphics, promotion, marketing, website management, and logo design. Please visit our website at 8158podcast.com. For questions, collaborations, or to share your story, our email address is contactus@8158podcast.com. Until next time, let's continue to honor the legacies and remember the sacrifices of those who serve, every brave man and woman on the front lines, protecting and defending us all. This is Rico signing off and honoring 8158.